All right, hello and welcome everybody. It's time for the second half of Chapter 3 of America's Great Depression by Murray Rothbard. Now, in the last episode, we covered 3 of the different alternative explanations of credit depression. We covered overproduction, underconsumption, and the acceleration theorem. Today we're going to be covering the dearth of investment opportunities theorem, or theory, Schumpeter's business cycle theory, qualitative credit doctrine theory, and finally, overoptimism and overpessimism. This one is going to be a little bit reference heavy. I'm going to try to be a little bit better about giving you guys more references to click on, because a lot of these books are available for free, or PDFs available for free, and you can really learn a lot about both the pro and con arguments by going for these. So I'm going to be, I think I have 6 or 7 or something like that. A ridiculous number of whatchamacallit, references for this one, but I think that's okay. So I think we're going to figure this out and it's going to work out all right. So, first topic, the dearth of investment opportunities. So, what is this theory? What is this theory, and how does it result in booms and busts? Well, the idea behind this theory is that there is a boom that is characterized by the opening or the openness of many investment opportunities, and that the bust is explained when these opportunities dry up, and that there's some kind of periodic cycle of investment opportunities appearing for people to use and investment opportunities being all taken up and used up by people and drying up. There's a few examples of this, of things that drive this, for instance, in the theory. Things like population growth, the discovery or utilization of new types of resources, technological innovation. These are all things that, make investment opportunities, new investment opportunities available. And the theory is that when you discover a new thing to play around with, when you learn a new technology, when you get new people, that creates opportunities, and then, people rush into those investments. And if that population growth, if those new resources become old hat, for instance, those investment opportunities go away, and thus you get a general bust. The primary source that Rothbard has for this is in footnote 16, Alvin H. Hansen. And I'm going to link to his original paper. There's a person who tried to kind of break this down a little bit named Terborgh, something like that. He has a book on this topic. I'm going to point at that as well. And then, in addition to that, Hansen wrote a response to Terborgh's. It's spelled really weird, but it'll be in the description. Terborgh criticisms got a response by Hansen himself in a separate book, so I'll link to that as well. So there's a wealth of information about how this kind of works. So Terborgh, refuters of the stagnation, to quote Rothbard, for the refuters of the stagnation theory tacitly accepted Hansen's causal theory and simply argued empirically that these factors would be stronger than Hansen had believed. Rarely have the causal connections themselves been challenged. Basically, nobody is denying that these things cause what appear to be booms, but as Rothbard will explain, they don't explain busts very well. So basically, these kinds of things, these appearances of brand new investment opportunities might explain some booms, but they don't explain the resulting bust that comes after the boom. There's no actual. So I'm going to go into Rothbard's details on this. Basically, Rothbard says that the derivation that Hansen uses derives from a Walrasian, that's Walras, W-A-L-R-A-S. He's one of the early guys who came up with subjective value theory. Him and Jevons and why am I blanking on the Austrian? Oh goodness. I just read his book. I just read Principles of Economics by... Hold on, let me... Carl Menger. Thank you. Okay. Carl Menger. I just read his book. So the problem with this is that the Walrasian equilibrium is kind of an evenly rotating economy. It doesn't take into account things like tastes, changing tastes, technological knowledge. Resources and technological knowledge are considered given and unchanging. But, as Rothbard notes, just changing the tastes and time preferences of the people will shatter this whole system of thought. Basically, new natural resources don't necessarily... Well, basically, it neglects the price system, and it forgets that you can have a higher quality of investment, or you can have more investment. Quantity is a thing too. You can build more if you have consistent profits in an industry, you can build more factories to produce the same thing to fill that demand more until profits drop to zero, right? And all of that's going to be profitable until profit hits zero. So that's kind of the crux of Rothbard's argument, is that this Walrasian derivation is not particularly realistic. It's missing out on a lot of things that change, and those changes are often very, very important. So some other side points that Rothbard makes is that simply the appearance of a new natural resources is not the same thing as the appearance of profitable investment opportunities. For instance, I could try to give you an example. People didn't really know what to do with crude oil for a while until, after oil wells were discovered. People had crude oil, but they were like, well, what do we do with it? The whole refinement process into multiple different hydrocarbon chain lengths for various industrial applications or commercial applications didn't come until a bit later. And so, those profitable investment opportunities might not even line up in time with the discovery of the new resources themselves. There's a similar problem with population growth. For population growth to increase productivity, you need more investment. If you have more people, you need more places in factories for those people to stand and do work. Otherwise, you're not going to actually increase productivity. You're going to increase consumption. For population growth, you might have a boom. Another point that Rothbard makes is that for population growth especially, you might have something like a boom in construction in particular industries that are used by these new people. But those extra funds have to come from somewhere. They either have to come from reductions in other industries, or they have to come from a general uplifting of the economy, which kind of lifts all boats. One of the things that Hansen stresses that Rothbard doesn't like is technology. The state of technological knowledge is not a strong determiner of productivity. Again, you need investment. You need actual... If you know a way to build a bread factory, you still need to have the investment before you and build the bread factory before you gain any productivity from those technological advances. Some businesses, and in any industry like this that depends on technology, or to any degree, there's going to be some businesses that lag behind. There's going to be some car makers that use slightly older technology than other car makers, right? That's where he gets into the point where quantity and quality are both valid routes for investment. You can always, for any significantly profitable enterprise, there should be investment opportunities in similar goods, not necessarily improved ones, and not necessarily using improved methods. Rothbard notes that there's a neglect of the price system. Okay, so I'm actually going to post a link to a video as well here, because there's a line here that I want to just read verbatim, because it's important, and it's something that is very unique to Austrian economics. Okay. Where is it? There it is. In a free market, prices determine costs, and not vice versa. So, in classical and neoclassical economics, the way that prices are determined, compared to, say, costs, are different from how they are determined in the Austrian economic view. I will post a link to a Mises University talk by Jeff Herbener from 2022, where he observes that in the Austrian economic theory system, value originates subjectively in the mind of the consumer. If I want something to eat, if I feel hungry, I'm going to place value on foodstuffs that can solve that hunger problem, right? That determines what those people are willing to pay for consumer goods. If I'm not that hungry, maybe I won't pay that much for a sandwich. But if I'm starving, I might pay more, right? All of these things working together with many, many people buying and selling things and fulfilling their desires will result in a market, and that market will create prices that are going to fluctuate, but at any given point, they're going to be somewhere. And the person who's really, really super hungry is not actually going to pay more for food than the not very hungry person in general. There'll be edge cases like a man who just got lost in the desert kind of thing. But, in general, that's how the market works, is that you want something, you're willing to pay for it, and the amount that you're willing to pay for it determines the price that people are going to try to sell it for. And that price that they're willing to sell it for determines their desires for producers' goods, which in turn determine the value, the prices of those producers' goods. This is something very unique to Austrian economics, and so I'm going to highly recommend that you check out that Herbener talk, because it's really good. And he actually gives a similar version of it in a couple different years, but Austrian price theory is very different from classical and neoclassical is the real point here. So just pay attention to that. Be careful. So then Rothbard kind of breaks down why these busts that this theory, this dearth of investment opportunities theory brings out, aren't really busts. Because there's no reason for a new technology becoming old hat to start bidding the prices of producers' goods over the consumers' goods that they're going to result in producing, right? There's no bad signals that are being sent to entrepreneurs, because this is an ERE-based theory. It doesn't have entrepreneurship, really. Entrepreneurship is merely a function of technological advancement. So the problem is that the bust doesn't really happen. There's no real good justification for a general bust. You might find occasional partial busts in the economy, but not what we see in the Great Depression. This failure stems from the pervasive overbidding of producers' goods versus the consumers' goods that they're going to produce, that they're going to create. And this bad signal for entrepreneurs is generated by credit expansion and credit expansion alone. And one other point that Rothbard makes is that often people working on this kind of theory, this kind of investment opportunities theory, are going to confuse fluctuations, construction going up, car production going down, something like that. They're going to confuse these fluctuations from a general increase or decrease in the in the workings of the economy. They're fluctuations, not cycles. And so this investment opportunities theory is not so bad for talking about fluctuations sometimes, but it doesn't explain the business cycle. So that's kind of all that Rothbard has there. Next, he goes on to discuss, Schumpeter's business cycle theory, which he describes as this. Basically, bank credit expansion pushes technological innovations. These new innovations disrupt the old order, but then eventually they dry up and you result in a depression. Rothbard explains that this is kind of a tissue of fallacies. But before we get there, I'm going to note that I'm going to put in the description links to a couple of different sources. Number one is Schumpeter's Theory of Economic Development, which is available for free. And if you want to learn more about Schumpeter's theory, you should definitely go take a look at it. There's two defenders. That's in footnote 21. In footnote 25, over on page 74 of the version I have, there's Clemence and Doody. Yeah, Clemence and Doody are defending Schumpeter. I will have their paper, The Schumpeterian System, in the links. And then we've got a couple of anti-Schumpeter people. From footnote number 24, we have Carolyn Shaw Solo, Innovation in the Capitalist Process, a Critique of the Schumpeterian Theory, and Simon S. Kuznets, Schumpeter's Business Cycles, in American Economic Review. Some of these I managed to find PDFs of on archive.org or like directly on the internet, I'm going to have a couple of Google Scholar links, because I think the papers that they're linking to are not like legit, but at the same time, you can't be. I feel like offering the Google Scholar link that says PDF here is somehow more legitimate than than simply offering it directly to PDF. But it's literally like one extra click and you'll get it. So don't worry about it. So let's get into the fallacies that Rothbard describes in the Schumpeterian theory. Okay, number one, why the hell are entrepreneurs not accurately forecasting things? This is their job. They're good at it. It's not just that it's their job, it's that they're good at it, and the profit-loss system kicks bad entrepreneurs out of the game and lets good entrepreneurs get more stuff and get more activities, get more resources. There's no explanation for this in the Schumpeterian theory at all. Number two, there's a cluster of innovations. That's not usually how, innovations in technology work. They often take a long time to develop, but are generally quick to increase output once they appear. For this theory to work, the output has to increase after the innovation has kind of done its work, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm just gonna read this because it's a little bit Rothbard and probably worth going over carefully. Quote, in reality, it may take a long time for a cluster of innovations in a new industry to develop, and yet it may take a relatively short time for the output of that industry to increase as a result of the innovations. Yet the theory must assume that output increases after the cluster has done its work, otherwise there is no boom or bust. It's a time question. When do these boosts happen? Number three, this theory completely ignores time preference, savings, and investment. Again, it's very ERE, equilibrium-ish. And then there's a disturbance to the equilibrium and things go up and things go back down. And that's not really how the economy works. Number four, it's not necessary to have bank credit expansion to innovate new technological processes. I'm not sure how Schumpeter missed this, but it's weird because he's like, well, it is bank credit expansion, but it's not bank credit expansion. And Rothbard just kind of like, no, this is stupid. Why are we looking at the effect instead of the cause for what the problem is, right? Number five, this periodic cluster of advances idea isn't really well rationalized, according to Rothbard. Basically, innovation happens continuously and it hits many firms when it does. The other thing is that this assumes like a cluster of entrepreneurial skill, which in the same way that entrepreneurs aren't being especially greedy tomorrow as compared to today. There's no reason for that to happen. There's no reason for entrepreneurs to be suddenly very skilled today and very unskilled tomorrow. Number six, entrepreneurship is not just technological advances, Rothbard notes. This is a really, really overly narrow vision of what causes the economy to grow and advance. And it's just not right, There's a later version. So Rothbard notes that later on, Schumpeter tried to paper over some of the problems in his original theory with this additional theory that creates a bajillion different cycles that all interact with each other. And you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the extra orbits that you need to make a geocentric model work, right? If you've got your base idea incorrect, then you're going to need to keep putting on these little perturbations here and there. It's like, oh, yeah, Mars does this, but then when it gets here, it does that, and we don't really know why, and then it keeps going kind of thing. So that's kind of what the Schumpeterian progress, the way that Rothbard described it sounds like to me. Basically, Rothbard notes that simply adding more and more periodic cycles on top of his original theory is actually a retreat from the method that he originally used. It's just kind of it goes from being something that's actually intellectually interesting and theoretically different to just there's 15 different cycles and they all interact with each other and so blah 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 blah. And that's not Schumpeterian at all. That's just more pre-Schumpeterian kind of stuff. So with that, Rothbard kind of feels like he's disposed of Schumpeter's business cycle theory. Again, there's going to be a bunch of references in the description. I did go over a little bit of some of them, and it's one of those things where there's a lot of detail here, and there's a lot of writing that went on just on this single topic, and Rothbard just, summarizes it in 1, 2, 3 pages. So, there's a lot to learn about this if you're really interested in learning more about it and really breaking it down. Again, references in the description. So let's move on. We'll move on to what Rothbard calls qualitative credit doctrines. Now, what these are, according to Rothbard, is that bank credit expansion is the problem. If it is directed outside of a self... I'm gonna read this verbatim because I didn't know what it was, but like... Bank credit expansion only generates inflation when directed into the wrong lines, i.e., in assets other than self-liquidating short-term credit matched by real goods. Loan to borrowers of impeccable credit standing. Now, he doesn't explain what this is in the book, so I actually went to look it up. And what I found is an example of a self-liquidating loan is... What a self-liquidating short-term loan is you get money to buy things that you then sell, and the selling of those things generates the revenue that you need to repay the loan, basically. A really good example of this is if a business in November, or October, say, October or November, buys on loan a bunch of stuff to fill up its inventory, to sell that inventory during the Christmas season, during the holiday season, and the sale of those goods is what repays the loan and also gives them a little extra profit. That is a self-liquidating short-term loan that is matched by real goods inventory that goes to someone with impeccable credit standing, i.e., a large business like Macy's or something like that. So that's what the qualitative credit doctrine says. It says that only when bank credit expansion goes into things other than this is when you have the problem. Now, Rothbard is skeptical of this, and I think with good reason. Basically, where loans go, his basic answer is like, dude, where loans go doesn't determine whether they're inflationary or not. It's whether you've actually used existing savings to provide the loan or whether you printed new money, whether you've inflated, right? So, he's just incredulous about this whole thing. As so far as loans come from real savings that people have saved, that's fine, because it's not inflationary. But even if you take a short-term loan and you give it to someone with good credit and they use it to buy inventory, but you print new money to do it, you're still inflating the currency. Rothbard notes a bunch of other little minutiae, like the fact that short-term loans can easily become long-term loans if those people with impeccable credit standing extend those loans with other loans. So the whole thing is kind of like nitpicking at this very small point. And Rothbard is not having it, basically. And the worst part is that if bank credit expansion has gone through the whole economy, so let me back up just a second. One of the places where the worst loans are supposedly going in this qualitative credit doctrine theory is that the worst loans go to the stock market, margin loans or loans to buy stock in any capacity whatsoever. Rothbard's point is that yes, loans that go to the stock market could be bad if they're inflationary because they're not coming from real savings. But the stock market, even if you don't have the banks directly loan to the stock markets, which is one of their apparent solutions, don't let banks lend to stock markets or force stock purchases. It's if you just bank credit expand and you throw a bunch of money into the rest of the private sector, they can borrow from the rest of the private sector. They don't need to do it from banks, right? It's just like this one step away from if we just didn't do this one little thing, we wouldn't have booms and busts. And there's no evidence that this is true. It's just not true. The one point in favor of this theory that Rothbard notes is that at least this theory sees there's a problem with the boom, hypothetically, right? Which is damning with faint praise, He notes that there's this weird fear of using loans on stocks when if it's profitable and if it comes from real savings, then it's a good use of moving capital funds around, right? The one thing that Rothbard notes is that consumption credit or installment credit is also not a problem because it doesn't go into malinvestment. If you take a loan to buy something to consume, you can't be creating malinvestments. You might still inflate the currency, but you're not creating malinvestments, and so you're not creating a bust in that sense. What I would say is that what if a proliferation of easy credit for consumption purposes also allows people to get easier credit to buy stocks or whatever capital goods that result in malinvestment? I think Rothbard's a little overly positive here. So just when you're going through that part, which in my edition is like the last paragraph on page 79 leading into the start of page 80, right near the end of chapter 3. So I would watch out for that, and I would think about that because you can't, because in the same way that Rothbard has claimed that you can't just like credit expand into consumption by giving it to the right people, because people have time preferences, and if you just give them random windfalls, they might do random things with them. In that same way, you can't make the credit system, the expansionary bank credit system, flourish for consumers without also making it flourish for the malinvestors, is what I think. That's kind of my little hand wavy argument about that. So take from this what you will, but that's definitely Rothbard's take on that, and mine too. So finally, we're going to be finishing up here. We're going to be talking about over-optimism and over-pessimism theories, which Rothbard takes about a page to break down, and like a third of what he takes is just a quote from somebody else, which, by the way, there'll be a detail about that. Basically, Rothbard's like, no, this is stupid Keynesian animal spirits. This is just these alternating psychological waves that you're claiming are happening. You can't measure, and you can't actually write down or show where they are. It's just that a thing happens and you say, oh, people were unhappy about the economy. And then good things happen. You're like, people were happy about the economy. It's entirely post facto, right? You can't really forecast it at all. The fact is that a market economy with entrepreneurs and voluntary trade rewards good forecasting and penalizes bad forecasting. That's what profit and loss are. The profit and loss mechanism by itself solves this problem of so-called over-optimism and over-pessimism. What causes the system to break down is when people get faulty signals from bank credit expansion that say that investments are going to be more, profitable than they actually are. That hurts the ability of entrepreneurs to do forecasting. There's also a bit in there about business psychology, and Rothbard notes that business psychology is often derivative from, not cause of, business situations. That expectation problems are self-correcting because if everybody is down and one person's like, I think everybody's a little too far down, they can solve that problem by buying things at a cheaper price than people would otherwise sell and make a profit that way. So I'm just going to quote this real quick. There is furthermore no reason for general over-optimism to shift suddenly to over-pessimism. In fact, as Schumpeter has pointed out, and this was certainly true after 1929, businessmen usually persist in dogged and unwarranted optimism for quite a while after a depression breaks out. The businessmen lag. And then he finishes off the chapter in this section with a quote from a V. Louis Bassi. Now, in the book I have, in fact, I'll even show it. I don't know if you can read it, but I hope you can read it. As Professor Bassick has pointed out in the text, it's actually V. Louis Bassi, and I went to look up his name, and it turns out what I think happened is that there was an E that didn't look very E-like in an earlier edition, and when they electronically transcribed the text, the physical text to digital text from a scan, it missed that it was an E and it wrote it down as a C instead. I confirmed this because there's actually a first edition paper version of this book over on archive.org. And in the original paper first edition, you can clearly see in the PDF that it's Bassi, B-A-S-S-I-E, not B-A-S-S-I-C. So he finishes with a quote on this. expectations of a decline prove to be mistaken. He will again rebuild his inventories. It's a nice little quote. It's a good way to finish the chapter, and it breaks down over-optimism and over-pessimism and these weird alternating psychological waves as the nonsense that they are. So, that is the end of Chapter 3. That is the end of the hardcore theoretical section of this book. We are next moving into Part 2, The Inflationary Boom, from 1921 to 29, with Chapter 4 called The Inflationary Factors. I will be working on it. I will be out for about a week, but probably about 2 weeks from today-ish, or a little bit more, or like a little bit more than, no, not 2 weeks from today. Hopefully less than 2 weeks from today. I will be doing the notes and the discussion for this one. So, with that, I will say thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope this was interesting. Remember that there's going to be a big old bunch of links with in the description for sources, which I hope that if you're interested, you will take a look at. And even if you're not interested, I maybe click on them and bookmark them just for the sake of having these things handy. If you get into an argument, it might be a good thing to look back at and refresh your memory. So yeah, there we go. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you want me to cover anything in particular, I'm working on videos here and there, but if you have anything that you would like me to cover in particular, a book or a topic, feel free to drop me an email. It's MNH, as in the initials of Marginal Non-hermit, at marginalnonhermit.com. You can send me email there, and I'm trying to put these things up on Odyssey, BitChute, and YouTube now, for the most part. Some of the stuff that I feel like shouldn't go on YouTube because it might be too controversial, I'll keep off of YouTube, but you can always get the uncensored, not even censored, just like safe, the stuff that might possibly be like unsafe on YouTube stuff from BitChute and Odyssey. And you can always check out my blog, marginalnonhermit.com. So yeah, thanks again. I appreciate your time. I hope this was a useful use of it. I hope you're enjoying going through this book with me, because this is my first time going through it, and it's been very fun and enlightening and helpful for me to have to basically produce a talk on each chunk of each chapter as I go through. It really helps me kind of understand it better. And I hope that if you're going to go through this book, that you can listen to these after you finish reading, or maybe before you read, and make sure that you're not missing anything too important, because I'm trying to cover all the main points. So yeah. That's all I got for now, and I'll see y'all later. Have a good week.